on the Two Turtle Tom live show, and we have a very special guest for you tonight, Dirk Barnard from South Africa. Dirk, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, Tom, Will, thank you for having me.
So happy to have you. And uh, Will Espenshade, co-host tonight, he really encouraged me to get in touch with you and bring you on and talk about the tortoises of South Africa. So, Will, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
And let's go to the chat. If you're new here, welcome. We do this every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We talk some aspect of turtle and tortoise biology or turtle and tortoise keeping. So we are happy to have you here, and we have a lot of returnees week after week after week. So in the chat, if you're here, if you're new, if you just want to say hi, we'll shout you out. So Dragon Lair is Podrick, he's here. Wes Coleman, Wes is already asking a question about the thumbnail. Patrick Lee is here. Mikey Ben is here. Mike Chan works, he's CNC Tortoises. Phil Simpson. And yeah, Wes is saying hi. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. And Dirk, let's start off with Wes's collection. Is that a Homopus areolatus in the background? And how did I pronounce that?
Yeah, well, it's a
How would you
it's a bit
pronounce it?
difficult. It's a bit difficult for me to judge because I mean it's Latin names, but
Yeah.
yeah, we pronounce it Homopus areolatus.
Uh-huh.
That's just the names have been changing up and down, but it's the more common name now is just the common or just parrotbeak tortoise. We always used to call them, or I still prefer calling them padlopers, just purely because that's where the Afrikaans name comes in. And yeah, just fun fact. A lot of people, and I would say not to be biased, but it's more a general term with Afrikaans people. Afrikaans is a language derived mainly from Dutch. And padloper basically, if you directly translate it, means a road walker. And a lot of people, when they see a tortoise, even in today's day and age, if they see a tortoise in the road, they call it a padloper. And I mean, we're the country with the most diverse range of tortoise species. So, especially if you're going more to like the Northern Cape or the Karoo regions, where you get more varied species of tortoises, you get some people that actually tend to get upset if you try and correct them. And then they'll say, my parents have been calling these padlopers since they were kids. And so at the end, it's a losing argument if you want to try and educate some people. But yeah, nevertheless, they're my favorite indigenous tortoise species in South Africa. I breed with them as well. And yeah, mainly for
Awesome.
the reason that they don't get big. I see in the comments there's quite a lot of people that have asked about it. And yeah, that's unfortunately for me one of my main things that I get bugged about in my inbox is, can you ship to the US or can you ship to Europe? And for my part, I don't sell tortoises. So yeah.
Understood. Could you give us an overview of the tortoise fauna of South Africa?
Well, basically, there was a very nice poster that I circulated for a herpetologist. He's actually doing his master's degree currently in the US. I think it's in Florida that he's doing it. And yeah, that'll be on my Facebook page as well.
Cool.
But it basically just shows all the different species. And the most interesting thing about the name changes. I mean, a lot of people would think that Signatus, previously they were Homopus signatus, and now they've been classified as Jacobius signatus, and then Boulangerii, which is also a dwarf tortoise, has also moved away from Homopus to Jacobius. So yeah, I prefer the dwarf tortoise species mainly just because some of them can be housed indoors, and I mean, it's for me the most interesting thing is that there's a lot of the things that I do and a lot of the breeding techniques that I use which aren't from South Africans. I mean, we as South Africans have got a hell of a lot to learn from the Europeans. I'm in correspondence with them regularly, and they literally mimic the natural vegetation habitat thermostatically with air cons, heaters, uh,
Wow.
fans, misters, and there's even I know there's some guys that even have an app on their phone which they can manually override, and that syncs with the weather patterns in South Africa. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a hell of a lot of science after it, and yeah, then you wonder why the guys are breeding them so prolifically, and it's basically just comes down to mimicking everything that is available for them in nature.
Hey, Dirk, I'm primarily familiar with Victor Lohr. Is he among the
Yes,
people
yes,
you're thinking about? Yeah.
yes. There's quite a few guys on the Homopus stud book. Um, and it's quite weird because I mean it's called the Homopus stud book, but one of the main features of the Homopus stud book is Jacobius signatus. So yeah, but obviously that was still when it had its previous name. But yeah, there's quite a few guys that are on the stud book. With Areolatus, you can get them quite readily, even in some cases out of the stud book. But Signatus, there is a bit of an issue in Europe currently, where some guys are breeding them out of the stud book, and then that, how can I say, it does interfere a bit with poaching because the legal traces of the animals can't be sourced. And if it's on the stud book, then obviously there's a paper trail with all the animals. So, but yeah, I mean, in my specific area, funnily enough, where I stay in George, which is more in the way southern part of South Africa, um, we mainly get angular tortoises here. Leopard tortoises aren't really supposed to be here, but with people picking them up next to the road or floods bringing them down, they are very, very good swimmers. And yeah, Areolatus, now the common padloper, we do not get them in my direct vicinity. It's the weirdest thing. Like specifically in my area, you don't get them at all. And if you do get them, I can almost 100% guarantee you they were reintroduced, of people keeping them as pets. They are escape artists, get very easily under gates and stuff. I mean, their carapace is what, 45 mils high at the utmost.
Wow.
So the runners below the gates, they can get under them quite easily. But anything with outside of about a 30-kilometer radius of where I am, you get them naturally occurring. So it's very weird that in this whole 30 square kilometer area where I live in, you don't get them at all. But outside that area, they are naturally occurring. And I think it's got to do a lot with the acidity in our soil. Our soil is not, it doesn't drain nearly as good as outside that 30-kilometer area. I mean, if you go about 15 kilometers from my house, just over the mountain, it's basically Karoo area. So it's dry soil, completely different climate. All the fog that we get in from the coast gets basically blocked by the mountain. So a lot of that rain that we get is basically because the clouds and everything is trapped in our vicinity. So yeah, Anything else that you guys would like to focus on?
Podrick says about 1 3/4 tall. Wow. That's a small turtle or tortoise.
So Dirk, I think of you as a lot more than just a tourist guy, although that's like the picture in my mind's eye when something in Facebook pops up. But you do venomous snake rescue or removal, relocation, and so that's a there are people that do that here in the United States too. But you post a lot of pictures of it. And I think I've seen you post pictures of some kind of gecko, maybe leopard geckos or something.
Oh, the giant ground geckos.
Oh, okay, giant ground gecko. And so do you also keep any kind of frogs or amphibians?
Yeah. So on a technicality, I know the US is also very particular with different states. From what I can understand from corresponding with guys, for instance, in Florida, they may breed CITES 1 animals like radiators and that, but they can't export them out of the province. I don't know how true that is, but that's my understanding of it. Now in South Africa, we've got every province has got their own legalities. I'm probably in the worst province when it comes to keeping reptiles. When you talk about strictness and punctuality and stuff like that, we, for instance, need a permit to keep a corn snake. Any exotic snake, any indigenous snake, basically any reptile, exotic or indigenous, we need permits for. So yeah, I keep various reptiles. From next month, I will be doing snake shows that you can incorporate education into it. So there will be a form of that as a source of income, but it's going to be minimal. And then a small part of that would be is purely education. So that'll be going to places like townships and rural communities, showing people what a puff adder looks like, what a boomslang looks like, all those different things, what to do, what not to do. Because I mean, there's still a lot of work to do when it comes to education, and a lot of people. I mean, we get there's quite a few of our snake groups, and people would. I mean, if you Google now, common night adder or common egg eater, for the untrained person, they look very much the same. But the one is venomous. It won't necessarily kill you. You're going to have quite a lot of pain. It's a cytotoxic venom. But the other one doesn't even have any teeth. If it had teeth, it can't swallow the egg. So, yeah, they basically just gums. So yeah, I keep the common egg eaters. It's actually very cool if you check a YouTube video of them. They try and imitate a saw scale viper. So they'll try and strike the whole time, and they'll intertwine their scales, and it'll make like a very a sandpapery noise. If you take sandpaper and you were to do that, it does that. So it sounds and looks extremely intimidating, but the snake literally can't do anything to you.
So it reminds me of the joke about what's the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Well, it's how the teeth are on the outside of the jaw, and the rest of the joke is if you're that close to see, you're too close. So I guess if you're like looking at one of these snakes and you're going to try and look inside the mouth to see if there's teeth, you're too close.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, always the most fascinating thing about doing educational talks is, just the general perception that the public has on what they think an animal, like their characteristics are. But the main thing is how they feel. And I can tell you 9 times out of 10, when people are scared of snakes, for me, it sounds stupid, but I understand if you didn't grow up with reptiles or that at all. people always ask, how is the snake not slimy if they touch it? Their general perception is it like secretes a liquid and it's going to be slimy, and then they ask, why is it dry? Why is it's like slightly slippery, or and then you just think to yourself, what you're doing is making a little bit of a difference in people's perceptions on animals. And in the beginning of the conversation, people would promise you, they'll literally tell you, I promise you I won't touch the snake. And after about a half an hour, when you start talking about, you don't necessarily need to be scared, but there's a big difference between understanding something, fearing something, and respecting something. And yeah, as soon as, especially with the parents, if you'll always get like these big dads who try and be tough, and they are scared of snakes, and as soon as their daughter says to them, like, Dad, why don't you want to touch the snake, and it's in front of quite a lot of people, then the dad he wants to show that he's not scared, but you can see he is scared, and if he touches it, then he's also completely mind boggled on how the texture of the snake feels. So yeah, I enjoy what I do.
That's awesome.
Can I hit you with another question about reptile culture in South Africa?
Well,
the question is, in the United States, we have trade shows where upwards to 25,000 people will come over a 2-day show. It's primarily about buying and selling, but there's also a whole lot of passive education. And sometimes people see it as just a day out to see a lot of animals that's significantly less expensive than a zoo. And are there trade shows, whether that big or not, are there a good variety of reptile trade shows in South Africa?
Oh, well, obviously, I mean,
it's a big country, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you look out of obviously, I've got a passion for reptiles, so I try and search everywhere on YouTube, where is different reptile shows. I know, for instance, Hamburg is very big. I know that Daytona is very big. And yeah, there's always guys that do live videos, and they walk through and show you everything.
What about Johannesburg or Durban or any of those places?
Yes. If you compare it, I mean, Cape Town, for instance, had one, I think, last year, but it's very, very small. The biggest one that we have in Africa is the one in Johannesburg. It'll be now in May. I think it's 4th and 5th May. I may be wrong, but I'm hoping to go. And cool. The bulk of the sales would be ball pythons, just like many of the American shows as well. I see a lot of the guys complain and just say, it's just ball pythons. But yeah, steadily, I mean, even in South Africa, I think the reptile community is getting stronger and stronger. But I think the main aspect is people are getting more educated on it. The difficult thing to have growth with different animals. I mean, if you have a dog and a cat, they don't need eating. With reptiles, especially snakes, they need eating. And I mean, in our winter, just before the show started, we were still in load shedding. Now, you guys may probably not know what that term means. Load shedding is due to our government being corrupt and didn't provide enough servicing of generators, silos, supplying coal, all that. So we have too little power in South Africa to supply the country. So yeah, load shedding is usually anything between 2 hours and 10 hours a day. The government just cuts off the power.
Yeah, they call it a blackout here, or a brownout, an intended blackout. So
yeah, so basically
that's the translation, a brownout.
So I can just check on my phone quickly, and I can show you. Oh, it's technically still. So that's the app that we have, and then it'll show you like the different times where it's off, between 12 and 2:30, which is now, and then it's going to be off again from 4 to 6:30 tomorrow. Saturday 12 to 2:30, 8 to 10:30. And I mean, as a reptile owner, that forces you to make provisions, and at the end, everything costs money. I mean, we've got 10 kilowatts backup batteries, and we've got 12 solar panels on the roof. So I'm luckily not affected by load shedding anymore. But I mean, it has happened in the past that we didn't have the solar, and your incubators just switch off. I mean, there's nothing you can do. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges, I would say, in South Africa for keeping reptiles, and yeah, there's a lot of challenges for conservation as well, and that's one of the main things that I'm trying to change. But obviously, a one-man band, it does get difficult, it does get challenging, and obviously you have to have your own job as a side note to have an extra form of income. So yeah.
Have you done any in situ or in the field observations or work or volunteering or anything like that with any species? But maybe mostly I'm thinking about tortoises.
Yeah, currently I've taken a bit of a break of it, but I'm trying to see what the influence is on urbanization on tortoise populations. And sadly, a large portion of angular tortoises, that's not Chacina ungulata, their distribution, a very big part of it is on the coastline. And obviously, where there's coastline, there is supposed eco estates, but they still do a lot of damage. They still construct very big houses. And there's obviously beach houses. So, yeah, I mean, it was about 90 kilometers from where I stay. I actually went to go do a plumbing quote and just walked around a bit afterwards, and to see how much pristine fynbos land has been converted, and it's just a sheep farm. So, for instance, when I still stayed in Stellenbosch, which is just outside of Cape Town, we actually a friend and I went on a Sunday. He just said there's a spot where you usually see quite a bit of snakes if you go flip some rocks. And over a 2-day period, I found about 10 common padlopers. And the farmer said to me, listen, in the next 6 months, everything you see here, it's about 120 hectares, but it's pristine land. Everything is going to be flattened. Everything is going to be changed into crops, maize, lucerne. And yeah, the only thing that we could do is just remove the animals that we can, snakes included, and remove them or move them to another location. But you know, to get more on a technical point is, it's on the one side, if you sit in the palace of a house and you are a trust fund kid or whatever the case is, and you've got money on hand, it's very easy to judge. But I mean, if we take it a step further, farmers in South Africa aren't subsidized by government. Pre-apartheid, they were subsidized by government. So yeah, farmers get no support from the government whatsoever. So if you take it, basically, if you've got a very big piece of land which is for instance, like renosterveld. Renosterveld, I think, is the most endangered biome in the world. There's roughly 8% of the original habitat left, and even if that is pristine land and it's ecologically it's very sound, how are you going to tell a person that he cannot farm there and it's his piece of land and he must obviously supply his family, he must put food on the table for his family? I mean, obviously, if there's somebody else who can invest and say, listen, half of your farm needs to be designated to this, and they can supply them with the necessary funds, yes, by all means. If the guy doesn't want to budge, then he's just an idiot. But I mean, if people try and make a living, I mean, you can take it a step further. I mean, I'm not. I hunt myself. I'll hunt antelope and I'll eat every single thing of the antelope. But I'm, for instance, not at all into trophy hunting, shooting of cats and stuff like that. But in the end, it's not what I think is correct. It's if you want to think ethically and if a farmer's got cats and whatever on his farm, how can you tell him to not shoot it? And that money is basically what's paying for the anti-poaching units to patrol around his farm, for electricity to run on his farm, his electric fencing to run on his farm, for sniffer dogs or tracking dogs to find poachers. So yeah, I know of rhino farmers, for instance, in South Africa that have on multiple occasions for one of my friends said, we'll supply you rhinos for free. Just make sure they are protected. So yeah, there's a lot of people that have very, very good intentions. They just simply don't have the funds to do certain projects.
That's an interesting perspective. I used to work at a zoo in the Central Valley of California, and at that time, our zoo director told us there were more white rhinos in Texas than there were in South Africa, and a lot of, I mean, I don't know the conversion from acres to hectares, but there's very large ranches from 1 to 5,000 acres in Texas where they have all kinds of African hoofstock, zebras, giraffes, rhinos, and all running free, and you pay a fee to go hunt them. And that's, you think, sort of cruel, but there's a lot of native species that are collateral beneficiaries of that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get, is the collateral beneficiaries. So when those farmers might allow cat hunting or some kind of hoofstock hunting, there's a lot of collateral beneficiary animals to that. And certainly tortoises are one of them. No one's paying $250,000 to go hunt a tortoise, but they certainly will to go hunt something else. And I get it. It's a touchy subject for a lot of people who primarily come at all this from their heart as opposed to critical thinking. But yeah, I fully understand. It makes sense. Yeah.
Sure.
So what's the? Sorry, I gotta try and redirect back to tortoises. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to reset. Tonight we have Dirk Barnard. Dirk is from South Africa, and Will Espenshade is my guest of Capitolo Farms. He's my guest host. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Dirk about the conservation issues of South Africa and the care of some of the turtles, well, specifically the tortoises, but we could ask if you work with turtles too, in South Africa. So, Dirk, thanks so much for joining us. Dirk, it's like 2:30 in the morning where Dirk is. So we really, really appreciate you staying up to talk about turtles and tortoises of South Africa. Go ahead, Will.
I was going to ask, sort of, gotcha moments. What's the most unusual encounter you've had with a turtle or a tortoise, either in captivity at your place, or maybe someone says, Joe, I found this tortoise in my backyard. What do I do? And maybe you do a house call, or maybe you're out driving around and you see something interesting. Is there like highlights of your interaction with tortoises?
I would say probably the most unusual call that I've had was actually of a friend of mine. I was very, very angry that she didn't call me directly. She called me after her walk. Where I'm in, I stay in George, and as I mentioned, that's about 30 kilometers from the closest deserty area, the Karoo. And yeah, she walked here at our at the George Dam, which is basically where our water supply is for the city. And she said that she saw a blue tortoise, and I said to her immediately, there is no such thing. And she sent me a photo, and it was a common tent tortoise that was spray painted blue. And yeah, that animal, I cannot think that it will survive here because the humidity is way too much. I also don't know of guys that breed them in captivity that have them at high humidity at all. They'll have morning mistings and stuff like that. But yeah, I must. You guys should have asked me this before the time. I would have actually went to go try and pick my brain and check where. I should have a better story than that, but it was just very odd. It's like a desert species tortoise in a very, very humidity high area, and spray painted blue. But yeah, just to give you guys an idea how I started originally keeping tortoises, I would say mainly for keeping snakes and stuff like that. It's to do with my father, because my father always said I may not keep snakes. That's always something that I wanted to do. And when I did keep them, it's something that I liked. My mother, when I was I was 6 years old, she said that she wants to get a big tortoise for the garden. And occasionally there will be in a township or something, there will be a tortoise. And that we should, if we do encounter something like that, we should bring it home. And it was actually a few years after that that we actually realized it's actually quite a serious offense. You need permits and all that. And we later on we did go the legal route. But yeah, I was about 10 after I've started accumulating a bit of tortoises here and there. My dad started a business where they install pool tables and jukeboxes and stuff in shebeens. And a shebeen is basically like a nightclub in a rural area, like in a township. And it happened on many occasions when they go through the township, they'll see people carrying huge leopard tortoises. And when my dad and them stop and they're like, what are you guys going to do with a tortoise? And they're like, no, we're going to put it on its back on the fire. And then, yeah, the only thing that you can do is try and argue or take it off, or you offer them money. I'll understand, obviously, if you do offer money, you're fueling a trade and you're encouraging people to do it. But that's always easier said than done. And yes, that's how I did accumulate very, very large leopard tortoises in the past. And yeah, a bit after that, then I tried to get more into the dwarf tortoises. And the issue that I had with that is there was so little people in South Africa that actually kept tortoises, or there wasn't a page to actually try and reason with people what's the best diet to feed, what's the best way to keep them indoors. And that's how I basically got interested in watching more US-based YouTube channels, chatting with European breeders. And yeah, it just sounded completely weird for a little boy in South Africa having indigenous tortoises, and you have to, correspond with other countries to see how you can keep tortoises in your own country. But yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What were some of the channels on YouTube that you would watch? Do you remember any particular ones?
I've always been in the past that I've always been into like Camp Kennan.
Yeah.
And then usually if you're on those reptile channels, then they'll suggest other ones as well.
Yeah.
I see one of the guys that commented here was CNC Tortoises. I did check a couple of his videos. And let me think.
Well, Highfield puts out a lot of social media that's globally received too. Yeah.
The Tortoise Trust, Andy Highfield. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tortoise. The Tortoise Trust is that the one in Spain?
Yeah, he's in Spain now. He was in Britain for a long time. England.
Yeah, I've chatted with him a few times.
Yeah.
And for me personally, when I was at the Reptile Expo last year, that was my first Reptile Expo, and when I came back, my wife asked me, how was it? And I just told her, for me personally, it's awesome because, I mean, a friend of mine had a stand. Yes, we did sell animals. It wasn't tortoises, it was snakes and stuff like that. But for me, at the end, it's just to be able to go to. My wife was actually very angry with me because I said to her, we're going to Hooters to get some beers and that boneless wings. And my wife thought Hooters was something else other than a restaurant. But yeah, the wings were good. But just to sit in a conversation with 10 or 12 other guys, people that I've had them on Facebook for years, chatted with them so many times on WhatsApp and Facebook, all different questions of snakes, tortoises, whatever. And just to sit, have a couple of beers with guys, and just if you talk about something with somebody that actually understand what you're saying. So, for instance, if I sit in a room and there's accountants talking, about FICA and all these different things, it irritates me and it bores the hell out of me. And I think for many people, my wife included, that's how they feel when I talk about reptiles. So, yeah, if you just sit with like-minded people and chat about stuff that really interests you and people actually interested in what you say. So yeah, that for me was the biggest eye opener of a reptile expo, is just to chat with people and everybody is immediately on the same page.
Having that community, yeah.
Yeah, community or yeah.
How has that community developed in South Africa, and how would you compare it to the U.S.? Are reptiles acceptable pets today for kids, like they are here in the U.S.? You're seeing more and more people with bearded dragons and ball pythons and corn snakes, where 20 years ago that wasn't that common. Do people readily keep reptiles as pets in your area, or is it more for the kind of hardcore hobbyists?
Well, I think if you're gonna compare it with the US is gonna look extreme compared to us.
Sure.
I think we're very, very small, but then again, I think we're actually a very, very increasing hobby at the moment. Yeah, I think a lot of things have changed over the years. Like I mentioned, when I was a little boy, it was very difficult to try and get into different channels. Most of the people that are even commenting here, that I recognize the names, they weren't on Facebook when I'm talking 20 years ago.
Sure.
I don't think Facebook was there 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but
No.
yeah, so
maybe MySpace.
Well, there are old school bulletin boards, and I know there's at least a couple in South Africa. I joined them for a while, but it sort of seemed like it was a guys were trying to meet girls who were into reptiles more than guys were trying to learn more about reptiles. And yeah.
And the worst thing is the pretty girls didn't have a nice profile picture. They had a picture of a snake, so you didn't actually know who you're talking to.
Yeah, well.
So
yeah, photos were far. You had to get a scanner to get a photo back in the early days of the internet. Oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to get back on that point,
Yeah.
with social media, with WhatsApp, with Instagram, with Facebook, I mean, there's a lot of people that even message me from Europe or the US and ask, I see you keep tortoises. What do you do different to other people? And I didn't have that opportunity in the past to try and do that. You had to go through these weird portals that me and Will went through. I think you're referring to SA Reptiles.
Yeah, I don't remember. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I did a graduate thesis work on tortoises in South Africa. So I spent literally hours and hours and hours looking for different resources that could facilitate my academic interests. That's how I found Cape Tortoise Group. And Steve, I forget his last name, and yourself.
Martino.
Yeah, and then I think Misty Corton also had a page for tortoise rescue. I think she went into doing things with monkeys. And I had met Ernst Bard when he came to the United States, I think like in 88 or 89. He hand carried some tent tortoises to the zoo I worked at and met him. And so, yeah, very, very sparse. There's the, AAH, African Association of Herpetologists, and they must be in the high 20s for their conferences now for South Africa, but that's seems almost like 95% snakes and lizards. My graduate advisor might be the most published South African herpetologist now, Aaron Bauer, and he's in Pennsylvania. But there's a lot of long-term, well-respected academic herpetologists from South Africa. So that was my exposure for a long time. And to run across Cape Tortoise Group and seeing all the, you might say, common problems of, I found this tortoise in my backyard. I'm not sure how it got here. What should I do? And all those kinds of questions. It sort of softened the hardness of the academic perspective that seemed to be in South Africa for so long. I notice you get a lot of questions on Cape Tortoise Group about, I found this tortoise walking down the street. What should I do? And Cape Tortoise Group, I guess, has members from, well, of course I am, and I live in California, but on the local scene, it's a lot of South Africa, not just the Cape. And so I see there's been questions on there about hinchback tortoises and really large leopard tortoises on a road somewhere that maybe got hit by a vehicle and all. Mm-hmm. So it seems like you have a pretty good smattering of tourist people there, whether they're going through all the permit application process or they just like, here's a photo and of a tortoise in my backyard and maybe it's native, maybe it's not.
Yeah, the big issue that I have is just to talk about the admin side, and I'm quite a small Facebook page, but just the admin side of things, I'd say easily about 80% of the posts that get requested, I decline. That it can't be posted on the group, because to give you an idea, if somebody posts that they found a tent tortoise or a common padloper or a geometric tortoise, which is the rarest tortoise currently in South Africa, if somebody posts something like that, there is so many people that would comment and say, where do you stay? I can come pick up the tortoise by you. I can provide the best housing, the best care. And if you look at the background data of everything, it's just a normal pet for their children. They have got no clue what they're doing. The people aren't educated. They're not the kind of people that would do a bit of research. And it's those kind of people that would try and go to a pet shop and try and get a form of like a dog food or kibble or something like that. And yeah, I may be different, but I'm completely opposed to tortoise diets as a staple, like dog foods and stuff. Actually, because of you, William, that I started more getting in dried foods and stuff, and also started making my own concoction. And the tortoises like it quite a bit. But yeah, I'm not a fan at all of people posting pics and stuff on the internet, and the tortoises are just fed Missouri or something like that. It's completely unnatural. It's got ingredients. I mean, I've got it on my board. Yeah, just all the ingredients that are listed in Missouri.
Soy
And
and corn are the number one things that I think really shouldn't be in any tortoise food.
yeah, ground soybean hulls and ground corn is the two main ingredients. And yeah, if you just look at the composition of the ingredients, I don't really see stuff like hibiscus or mulberry or yeah, it's for me personally, it should have high fiber, low sugar, low starch, if any. And yeah, I just think a lot of people when they go to a shop, I think there's a very big difference in being a pet shop and a reptile shop. The reptiles, I find that a lot of people that have pet stores in South Africa, yes, there are quite a few that are very respectable, but I think in general, a lot of them are just out to make money, and they just try and sell the most expensive crap to any people.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's not to benefit the animals, and that's my main thing. My animal feed costs me a lot a month, but I know for a fact, I mean, even for my snakes, I don't buy in my own rats and mice just purely because I've got a hang up on what are people feeding the mice before I buy them. So I rather breed my own. I give them a complete rodent staple pellet, and I know they're getting all the nutrients and minerals and everything in that they should. And I think in captivity, a lot of people they miss the plot completely when it comes to basic diet. So
I agree. Absolutely.
How easy is it to feed tortoises the plants that grow in these habitats in the wild?
Well, yeah, there's certain. I know some of the European guys have asked me specifically, just purely because they're more into the dwarf tortoises. Then they ask me tips on how to, for instance, grow speckworm. Speckworm it's very vague. English name is elephant food tree. It's the plant that releases the most oxygen out of any other plant. I know there's actually plantations in California that they experimented with in the past. I'm not sure if it's still up and running. But I mean, that's one of the plants that are indigenous in South Africa, and tortoises actually do like it. You get quite a few different variants of it. Some of them have got it's basically a brownish stem with green, succulent green leaves. So it's got a lot of moisture in.
A
For
common
instance,
name in the United States for that is called jade plant.
the jade plant is similar, but it just looks completely different.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the jade plant doesn't get nearly as tall, and it's got much broader leaves. But it's also a succulent. But I do find personally that they don't like the jade plant very much. I think the speckworm is a little bit sweeter, because some people in South Africa actually take spekboom and they put it in their salad. I wouldn't say it's a really common thing, but it's healthy for you. But I can't think that you're going to do that with jade. Jade looks as if it's going to be a bit bitter.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, there's a lot of things that you can do with succulents. I mean, the nice thing about succulents is the cuttings is just to take the leaves out and put them, dry them out for about 2 weeks, and then you just replant them and then they go. Every time I talk to somebody, I forget to research the English name of the one plant that all tortoises in South Africa that I've seen like. Just to directly translate the name for you, skilpadkos means tortoise food. So it's actually a plant. It's a succulent that I have to make little prisons everywhere in the garden where they are, and then once a week or so I just go break off a few leaves and just chuck it everywhere in the garden, because if you don't do it, they will literally eat it root and all, and it won't recover.
When I was traveling around in the Karoo, the only places you could find that was in a thicket of some kind of shrub, because I guess it's so palatable. If it wasn't there, hoofstock would clean it out. And when we'd find a big thicket, we'd go and look, and we'd almost, maybe 1 in 20, 1 in 30 thickets like that, especially if it's in a stream bed, we'd find an angulate tortoise sitting there among it all. Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's weird how certain plants have found ways to survive. I understand obviously some ways are a bit ironic or just pure coincidence, but in some cases you'll see succulents grow under or in between very thick thorn bushes. And in South Africa we get some of the thorn bushes that you do not want to put your hand in them, because it's not just the prick. It like gives off a slight toxin, so it actually itches and it burns. And then that succulent, I don't think the tortoises can get in there. So that succulent actually is thriving, and it's also a little bit more up from the ground, so it's got perfect drainage as well. I've seen quite a lot of carcasses and stuff under these thorn bushes and stuff. But at the end, you try and look for evidence as to, was it a naturally occurring carcass, just that it died of natural causes, or was there puncture wounds or stuff like that? And if we get back to conservation, I think one of the main issues that we have in South Africa, and I think it's much more aggravating than what poaching can ever be, and it's crows, pied crows. There was a study by the University of Cape Town done a few years ago, and if you take the Cape side of the Western Cape, like around Cape Town, the average annual temperature is 19 degrees Celsius. If you take summer, winter, everything. And ironically, the pied crow, their preferred temperature for breeding is 19 degrees Celsius. And pied crows are supposed to be migratory animals, and in many cases they aren't anymore, and they reside permanently in the Western Cape. And what really frustrates me is the IUCN red list, or they basically say that pied crows are an endangered species, and I call big BS on that. They may be endangered in Northern Africa, where they are supposed to be naturally occurring, but I can guarantee you 100% they're not endangered in the Western Cape. And I've spoken to ecologists and herpetologists in the Northern Cape. It's a huge issue. And if you speak to guys, I'm not a raptor expert. I've got a few friends that are. And obviously where there are crows, they outcompete raptors. So it's not just for reptiles. I mean, there was the one pic that I shared on my Facebook page. And if I think back, it was roughly about 100 various ungulate and common pudloper and leopard tortoises. Most of them were all under about 12 centimeters. So I think you guys call that about 4 inches.
Yeah.
So let's say 100 tortoises, fresh carcasses, to raise 2 crow chicks. Now, how is that sustainable? And I'd say with full confidence, they can come lock me up. But if I were to have a farm, I would have a 270 on the farm, and I would shoot every single crow that enters on my farm.
Well, it's been a problem with native tortoises in North America. I've heard some biologists call them subsidized predators because they can also eat kitchen waste and restaurant waste and go into landfills. So if there's not enough tortoises, they can go eat scrap human food. When I was talking with some ecologists in the Karoo, they said the bigger problem a big problem that's helped subsidize the crows is when sheep graze, they make a network of paths. And it used to be all the shrubland was almost like a closed canopy, 1.5 to 3 feet off the ground. And so the tortoises could run around in there and find a little patch of sun and do okay. But once all that was opened up with all this maze network of sheep paths, now when the tortoise walks across that open spot, now the crows can see them and go grab them. An unofficial survey technique that I used when I was there is you just go to a rock outcropping, because the crows will drop the tortoises or go to a prominent place so that they can see they're not being preyed upon or someone's not stealing their food. And we would find dozens and dozens of different tortoises in and among all the rocks. But of course, it's just the scraps of shell. I think we identified 4 or 5 species at one of these in the northern part of the southern Karoo. There were tent tortoises and leopard tortoises and ungulates. The friend that traveled with me was more the taxonomy guy in our group of 3 when I went there. And he picked out 5 species of tortoise from one pretty big prominent rocky area. So same thing here in the U.S. in a way. Alter the landscape, and crows are good at taking advantage of that because they're very smart. And yeah, they go through and wipe out a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
like,
and that
not just tortoises.
Ravens in desert tortoise territory. We had Luke Basalto on the Let's Talk Turtles podcast. Yeah, and he was telling us how ravens in the U.S. Southwest are really doing the same thing that the crows are doing there. And their populations are expanding because they can live with people and humans. And he just seems to think that the ravens, like their favorite food was baby tortoises. They were like little raviolis to them. They would prefer finding a baby tortoise over any other food.
The one issue is, in general senses, yes, they do. I think the pied crows are a little bit bigger than the ravens that you guys get. It's quite a big bird, and in general cases, yes, they do prey on tortoises smaller than 10 or 12 centimeters. 2 years ago, December, we were driving on a game farm, or the entrance of the game farm along the west coast, and that's quite abundant ungulate tortoise area. And And my wife asked me, why did you stop all of a sudden? I'm like, no, there's a crow that's doing something that I think is a bit suspicious because it's too close to the ground. And yeah, I sound like a very old man all of a sudden, but
No,
so
you sound funny.
I turned the car around and went into the veld, and I saw there's a tortoise on the ground, but it's a very, very big, fully grown adult angular tortoise. And the crow is close to it, so I climbed out of the car. Only found out afterwards that area has actually got free roaming Cape buffalo on. Um, but yeah, I went to the tortoise, checked, and yeah, I couldn't believe it. The head of the tortoise was completely broken, and the rest of the shell completely fine. And that crow literally picked in and broke the back part of the head of the tortoise. And I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. It was like the 23rd of December, and I just thought to myself, what can I do? Because I know the tortoise is definitely not going to make it, even with the best medical care. And it's not like a bird that you can wring its neck if you know it's in extreme pain. And the only solution that I could come up with, and for some people it may seem extremely cruel, is I've got a bucky. You guys call it a pickup. The only thing that you can do, in my opinion, to euthanize the animal humanely is just to slowly drive over the tortoise, and it's dead completely. For me, yeah, for me it was really not a nice experience. But at the end, for me, the worst thing that there is to see something suffer. So
How'd your wife take that? You said she was in the car with you, yeah?
well, my wife knows what I do, that I know what I'm doing,
She's
and that
pretty
I'd always.
pragmatic about it then?
Yeah, but my wife's understanding. She'll always understand that I'll always try and do what's in the best interest of the animal. And for me, I mean that's the call I made. I at the time I thought that was the best thing to do. Um, we actually had that same case a month ago. I'm very tuned in if we drive on the highway, that if we drive something that looks like a long stick or something, just to make sure, is it a snake? Because it does happen that a snake or tortoise or something gets tagged on the road. And I had exactly the same thing as that we had on the West Coast with about a 10 centimeter large leopard tortoise, about 200 kilometers from Cape Town, and had to do the same thing. If the tortoise is halfway run over, there's absolutely no way of saving that animal. And I mean, if it's trying to walk and you can see it suffering, that's the best thing, in my opinion, you can do, is drive with the car over it, because it's flat, it's dead instantly. But yeah, I understand it's obviously an upsetting topic and not everybody wants to talk about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's a bit educational if people can understand. If you're in the middle of nowhere and you see an animal like a tortoise suffering, it's one of the things you can do.
I've done a similar thing with snakes. I've seen them where they were crossing the road and someone drove over it, and so like the front half of the snake is still alive and writhing around, but it's literally been squished into the pavement, so it can't move away. So the simplest thing is to just crush its head, and it's sort of I have a lot of ambivalence about that, but I agree with you. It's about reducing suffering.
It was also now three weeks ago. I got a call to remove a boomslang from a lady's yard. She was hysterical. Tried to get there as quickly as I could, and her Rottweiler. I actually had two of those cases in the last 6 months. The Rottweiler got hold of the boomslang, severed its spine completely, and in that case the snake can't move and it'll just stay stagnant. It can still slightly tilt its head to bite you, and yeah, it just interesting fact. I mean, a boomslang is probably one of the most docile venomous snakes in Africa, but it's also the most venomous snake in Africa. So some people always joke and say it's so venomous that it actually scares itself. But yeah, I adore boomslang. I mean, if you look at venomous snakes of South Africa, yeah, if you just that eyes is something else. So berg adders and boomslang are my two favorite venomous snakes.
Hey, Dirk, I see someone asked a question about some kind of plant seeds.
Do you know any websites that sell tortoise berry plant seeds? Neuraltia spinosa. Finding it hard to get to grow for my common padloper tortoises. I know it's native to South Africa.
Okay. They must just send me a message or WhatsApp or something. There is one site. I'm not familiar with that plant, but there is one site that I use. I actually don't know what the site's name is. I usually just go through the history of my phone and then it pops up. And that's the site that I use for anything that's indigenous or but yeah, like I said, I don't use that. And just on that topic, one thing that William, that you also taught me through selling your leaves and stuff, and I think it's an extremely underrated plant that is supplemented into tortoise food, is moringa.
Oh yeah.
And I think, I mean, there's probably breeders, if they were to see this, they're going to get really angry with me. But for me personally, moringa is one of the most it's one of the best, or probably the best food in my opinion, for popping colors of a tortoise.
Really?
Yes, is if you supplement it well, that, and I've seen quite a bit of difference if I use calcium supplements of Arcadia. That what's it called? Pro A.
Yeah, Earth Pro A is what it's called.
Yes.
Here. Yep.
So I don't know if it's just a combination of the mineral clay, the bee pollen, and the vitamin A additives, but there's most definitely a difference in if I raise hatchlings with that, and specifically with the moringa as well. There's definitely, or maybe it's my imagination, but maybe I just breed really good tortoises, but I definitely, from my side, see a difference in the natural colors popping more. If you look at like the ungulatas, their red comes out much brighter if you raise them with moringa. And I see there's some guys that always ask, is there different things that we can supplement our tortoise to bring colors out? Or some people have asked me or accused me and saying like, if you take pictures of your tortoises, why do you rub them with coconut oil and like color enhancing stuff? And I've just personally found the best way to take a photo of a tortoise is just to make sure that the carapace is wet, because then the color just bounces much easier. If you're taking tortoises and the shell is slightly dry, the tortoise looks completely dull. But as soon as you wet them, that the carapace color pops much better.
For sure.
I agree on the moringa. I use a lot of moringa, like by the handful, but I make big salads because I have a lot of animals. We talked a little bit before the podcast or show, I'm sorry, about maybe we can make a bit of a game with prizes.
Yeah.
So the prize would be a Capitola Farms t-shirt. The artwork was done by Matt Patterson. So I don't know if his artwork has made it to South Africa, but he's a well-known artist in North America, maybe Europe too. Anyhow, one of you two guys give a common name of a tortoise, and the person that comes back with the correct Latin name gets a T-shirt. Of course, they'll have to tell me the size. There might be an email exchange required, but so Philip Simpson said, "Game on." All right.
I see.
Go ahead, Dirk.
It'll be interesting. I'm just gonna check who comments first. Okay, I would say geometric tortoise.
Looking for the scientific name of the geometric tortoise. Win a shirt from Capodolo Farms. U.S. only, please. Will
Yeah,
bankrupt Will.
hard
He's
to South
shipping
Africa.
across the world, but
I mean,
I
you
have
guys
the
are
shirt.
all online.
I love
There's
it.
like Google and all kinds of resources.
Yeah, totally.
The rule is you just got to come back with the right name.
There is a significant delay.
All right.
So the answer is, I'm sure. Oh, there we go, Phil. There
Okay.
we go.
Philip Simpson. I'm writing it down, Philip.
Phil is going to be our guest next week, continuing our conversation from 2 months ago, Phil?
All right. So we could do a few more shirts.
Okay.
Tom, why don't you come up with a tortoise that's in South Africa?
How about boy, the ones I was thinking are pretty easy. How about the Eastern Hinchback tortoise? Which a lot of South Africans still know as the Bell's Hinchback tortoise. The Eastern Hinchback tortoise. Perhaps the most stunning of the Hinchback tortoises, but that is debatable.
I'm an Erosa fan.
Yeah.
Me too.
They
There's
get big.
nothing that
They get
beats
too
them.
big. Yeah. They're pretty cool. Probably no Hinchbacks where you are, Dirk. You're probably too far south.
Yes.
Yeah. No one. Come on. We need to just call Jeremy and have him jump in the chat and tell us what the Eastern Hinchback scientific name is to win a free shirt from Will.
You gave it away a little bit when you said the Bell's Hinchback.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It sort of gave it away a lot.
I gave a lot of tips, man. But the Eastern Hinchback has, because if you think about it, all the other Canixus in South Africa, their names are very much, their scientific name is very much like their common name. Okay, Podrick sort of came close, but come on, Podrick, you gotta use Google. Spell that name right. You're close.
Well, I'm personally a little offended here because I figured I would have more people punching up names. How about if there we go? So CNC tortoises. You're in Canada, right?
That's Mike. Yeah, he's in Vancouver Island.
All right, I'll work out the shipping. You got it.
Well, no, it's not. That's not the right answer, though.
Canixi's Belliana?
Correct. That is not the right answer.
Then why is it called the Bell's Hinchback tortoise?
It formerly was called the Bell's Hinchback tortoise.
Oh! Now I see where you're going.
Podrick is the closest. Podrick, that's still not right. You're close. You got one extra letter in there.
But I'll take that. I'll take that. It's
Okay,
not
Podrick. Podrick is the winner.
all right.
The Canixus Belliana, Zombensis, and then Carolyn Kindler and a bunch of other people did molecular work in 2012. At least they published it in 2012, and then elevated the eastern hinchback tortoise, which kind of runs all the way from Kenya, kind of on the eastern coast of Africa, down to like northern, like Limpopo area or something. But there seems to be quite a lot of those on the east coast of Africa. Pretty neat tortoise.
Okay, CNC, we'll give you an opportunity here to redeem. What's the smallest hinchback tortoise that is native to a very slim margin of a giant game park in northeastern South Africa? They're known, the distinguishing physical characteristic is they have a tricuspid upper beak. Yes,
they do. And I'm Dirk, do you ever hang out on iNaturalist?
Yes, I do.
Sweet. Yeah.
You got it, Patrick. It's yours, man. The shirt's yours.
Yeah, Patrick, we got it. iNaturalist is amazing. I identify all the Conyxus on iNaturalist. The Pretoria area, Pretoria. It's amazing how urbanized some of these Conyxus populations are. Seems like they're constantly interacting with people. Because I mean, one of the most rare hingebacks is always being put onto iNaturalist.
Well, let's well, people are trying to sort out the tricuspid beak thing. What the South African common name in English, not Afrikaans, is what is the mountain tortoise?
A leopard tortoise.
Oh, yeah. But you're not supposed to be playing the game, Dirk.
Oh crap! Sorry.
You got to get this.
I thought you were asking me.
So that's all right. You didn't yell out the Latin name, and if you say Gio Cologne, you don't win. Oh my goodness! I don't think there's that much of a delay with.
It's about 20 seconds. The mountain tortoise.
All right, there we go. CNC. Oh. All right.
CNC. Mike Chan. You'll have to go to a show in Canada now, Will.
No, I don't think so. But oddly enough, sometimes shipping to some parts of Canada is the same or slightly less than, say, shipping to Florida. So
I believe it.
Yeah, custom look. So that's 3 shirts, and we still have the tricuspid beak hingeback out there floating around. How about any of the species whose common name is sandwalker? I got that right, Dirk? That's what I heard they were called when I was driving around and upsetting people by looking at tortoises. And I same thing with tortoises in California. If you pick them up, they might pee, and now they lost valuable water. So I actually brought a small tub and water. So if I picked up a tortoise and it peed, I'd set it in the water in the shade, and they would drop their head down in that water and drink right away, even with myself and 2 people taking photos and agitating it and all that open fresh water, no hesitation. So sandwalker, in my opinion, one of the coolest tortoises. The geometric tortoise is related to it. I don't think anyone ever calls geometric tortoises sandwalkers, though. Maybe.
Part of the reason, we have so many different tortoise species that are commonly available in the pet trade in the U.S., but the South African species, none of them are in the pet trade except for a few notable examples, like the leopard tortoise of the Speaks hinchback. So, these are obscure for most people that keep turtles or tortoises in the U.S. You got to be like turtle nerds like you and me, Will, to study the turtles and tortoises of the world.
Yeah, that's
You've been there too to see
well,
these guys.
I think the big thing that comes into question with why there is so little tortoises or indigenous South African species in America, and this is not purely my own opinion, is I think prior to 2004, when exports from South Africa were still legal, and I mean, you can still do it legally. It's just a lot of paperwork and bloodlines and all that. But prior to 2004, when you didn't need all the different documents and all that, when there was quite a lot of tortoises shipped to the US, let's face it, 95% of those at least are dead. They didn't make it. And I think what in large part to blame is the exporters. I think when a lot of people collect these animals, they collect animals like I see nobody has commented. I almost said the wrong thing now. But yeah, if we talk about the sandwalkers that are obviously from a desert area, yeah, their main diet is mainly to do with okay. Yeah, with the main diet of them, or their staple of their diet consisting of succulents. And when these exporters remove these animals from the wild, all of a sudden they'll give them stuff like coleslaw and broccoli and lettuce, and it's stuff that's it's so difficult in the first place for normal tortoise to digest that food. And now all of a sudden all the intestinal flora, everything is being hindered. And apart from that, the tortoises are put in enclosures after they've lost quite a lot of moisture, because they obviously pee when you remove wild tortoises and pick them up. And I think one of the main things, and I've said it many times on my Facebook page, is hydration. Well, the importance of hydration. And when these animals are kept in camp, my personal opinion, I think they were removed from the wild. They were kept in camps that weren't suitable, not properly hydrated. And in that time is when they try and, sort out all the paperwork. And by the time the paperwork is sorted out and they exported, you basically get a malnourished, depleted animal on the other side. And for you, if you're not, I'm not saying you have to be an expert, but if you're not knowledgeable about a specific tortoise species and they are already basically 80% shot, then it's very difficult to revive that animal and get it back to where it should be. And at that time, there was also a very limited amount of research on species like Signatus. And there was quite a few that were exported to the US, if you look at the CITES documents of them. And the only people that I personally know of in the US currently that have Signatus is the Turtle Conservancy. They did it was animals that were brought in illegally, and they were seized and they were sent to their facility. So and I've mentioned it as well. There is one or two guys in the US I know that have, I think CNC Tortoises, the other guy that also has a pair, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong. I think I saw it on their YouTube page.
There are others, but they're not institutional, so I'll not mention their names. They're not hit up with hundreds of sell me baby requests.
So I think, if I look at different people's opinions on South African tortoises, a lot of them will have an opinion on that specific tortoise species, which I've been working for more than 20 years. And for instance, then they'll say the species is flighty. It's very skittish. If you pick it up, it just wants to get away. It's shy. It doesn't like being handled by people. And I completely argue against it. If you walk in my garden, my tortoises will come to you. They, in some cases, angular tortoises are actually affectionate. They want you to scratch them. I wouldn't say they're something like an Aldabra or radiated to that extent, but yeah, if you do see them in the wild, yes, by all means, then they are skittish. And what I'm getting at is, I think personally, a lot of the animals that people receive in the international community are sold them as supposed captive bred animals, and they basically just poached wild animals. And yes, in that case, the animals are flighty. They do not want to be picked up by people. The first thing that it's weird to see on a very hot summer's day how fast an angular tortoise actually is. If it wants to get away, it's actually bloody fast. So, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Cool.
I want to share an interesting anecdote. When I was with Ernst Bard at where he did his PhD work, we were walking around with him, or else maybe the rancher who owns that land would have come out and shot us. I'm not sure. But it's a well-protected site. And we're finding the parrot beaks and geometric tortoises. And the first parrot beak I saw there was what I would characterize as brachiating about 1.5 feet off the ground through tall grass. It was like swimming through the grass. And all of a sudden, this little turtle tortoise popped its head through the grass, and it saw myself and one of the people I was with, and you could almost see its little head going, "Oh shit!" It turned around and tried to get back away. And then when we would pick one up and try and pose it for a photo, they were just as likely to step forward to try and bite you as they were to try and run away. They're very charismatic little guys. It might be a good idea then to go ahead and end the contest with 3 shirts. So
sounds good to me, Will.
Give
your email address. So the winner's email, Will. What's your email?
My email is capidolofarms@gmail.com.
capidolofarms@gmail.com. Capidolo is underneath Will's name. So capidolofarms@gmail.com.
And I made a list, so
excellent.
It might be a good idea then. Patrick mentioned something really interesting.
Yeah.
Tonight was the first time he ever heard there's more than one dwarf tortoise in South Africa. There are 3 species in the Samabates genus, which is the sandwalkers. There's the geometric tortoise that Dirk talked about. There are tent tortoises, and those have been mixed mashed in taxonomy off and on for years. And then there's the serrated tent tortoise, which is mostly north of the Orange River, which is a geographic indication between South Africa and Botswana. There's only one species of leopard tortoise. There's a lot of good evidence for that taxonomic status. There's angulate tortoises. I think there's 3 hinchbacks in South Africa, the natalensis, which is the tricuspid beak guy.
There's 4.
Guy, and then zombensis. And
you forgot Lobatiana.
Oh, Lobatiana. There we go.
Yeah, 4
good thing we have a hinchback tortoise expert in the house, huh?
South Africa has more hinchbacks than any other country.
And then just out of South Africa, I don't know if it's been found in South Africa, is a tortoise that was first described, I think, in 2008 or 2009, and I don't know if it's Chersovis or Homopus, but the species is Solus. It's in southern Namibia.
Yeah, yes. They aren't found in South Africa. No.
Okay.
It's actually, it was one of the talking points. If we get back to the permit system and all that, with each province having different requirements. For instance, with like I said, with me in the Western Cape, we need permits for everything exotic or indigenous. But many provinces, for instance, like Gauteng, where Johannesburg, Pretoria is, they don't need permits for exotic animals. So Chersovis solus would technically then fall under exotic. So they may apply for a permit to keep solus in Gauteng,
That's cool.
purely because it's just outside of the South African border.
Interesting.
But yeah, I see there was one question.
This one?
Yeah, about if I've encountered pyramiding in wild leopard tortoises, and the honest answer is no. And that's why I always try and make a point of it to mention. And yeah, I'm more of a direct person, so I think out of experience and the research that I've done on the internet and YouTube channels and stuff, sorry, you guys are Americans, but my research that I've found is more specific to Americans, is in their diets they give way too much protein. And I have had this argument with a few guys, European guys, that would say, I've been keeping tortoises for 30 years. Pyramiding is a humidity issue, and I cannot disagree with it more, that it's definitely got to do with both humidity and protein. I've seen guys that are reputable breeders of Pedalis, and they, in my opinion, the animals do not look good. And I'm saying that with all respect. It literally looks like the sandwalkers that Bill was mentioning, the Samobata species. So if you Google tent tortoise, that is how I've seen a lot of North American leopard tortoise breeders, and it's completely unnatural. It's not at all how the tortoise is supposed to look. And the main concern for me, and I think a lot of people that, for instance, watch this streaming, is they don't understand tortoise taxonomy, or just like watching videos, is the vertebral column of a tortoise. If that's the where's the camera? If that's the carapace and it's making that little point, the vertebral column is growing under that under the scutes, and I can't think that it's apart from not being natural, I can't think that it's healthy for the tortoise. And I mean, even if you look at parts like the Kalahari, which is very dry, especially in summer, you'll get tortoises that have very slight pyramiding. But if I'm saying pyramiding, it'll be like 2 or 3 millimeters, and it's not a complete bump. So I think that's definitely something to look at. And one of my other suggestions with pyramiding, especially with captive breeding, is I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on nighttime heating, and they use the wrong heating. Yes,
I see.
They use, for instance, they use the wrong heating methods. They use red lights, like infrared lights, and there's evidence to suggest that that's not good for the tortoise's eyes, as opposed to snakes, for instance, that aren't really bothered about it. But the one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is, and it's something that I've been testing out now for the past 2 years with my tortoises. for obvious reasons. In winter, it's obviously colder in the room, so they try and bask more than what they usually would, as opposed to in summer where there's a higher ambient temperature in the room. So when they bask more, they're under the heat source more. So that puts extra strain on their shell. And in the wild, they have ambient humidity. And under that heat source, there's very low humidity. And that increases pyramiding. So what I do is with my tortoise enclosures, I've got even if it's a very small one, I put a humidifier in. And I'm a plumber, so I always have access to PVC pipes and PVC glue and stuff. So then I just have a little makeshift thing that I put on top of the humidifier with 2 elbows, and it basically just pumps into the enclosure, and it just gives a little bit of relative humidity for the enclosure, and that definitely does bring down pyramiding. I know some guys, for instance, will suggest doing a morning misting. I do a morning misting and I have humidifiers on. And the humidifiers are on a timer, so as soon as the lights go off, the humidifiers go off. But yeah, that's, like I say, that's the nice thing of being in a hobby. A lot of guys have different opinions. Some guys say it works, some guys say it doesn't. But out of my personal experience, that's what works for me.
Well, I go broader than just humidity. It's total hydration, because they need to drink a lot to help moderate or flush out the slightly higher protein that people in captivity feed. And fiber is part of that too, to keep the food bolus moving through so it doesn't cook longer. Cook is not a really poor term, but it doesn't sit longer. The tortoise flushes everything out more readily. So it's a combination of things, but I agree. It's a desiccation of the enamel on the shell, and it's hydration both on the outside and drinking. And then definitely too high a protein. Even if they flush it out a lot, it puts stress on a lot of internal organs to encounter that on a routine basis. The occasional feces they might eat of something that's higher in protein is one thing, but if every meal is really high in protein, that's not good at all. Really good points, Dirk.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, Dirk has to sleep. Well, we have to let this man sleep.
Sorry.
Because it's now 3:40 in the morning. We're Dirk.
I guess we've gone a while.
So, Dirk, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was just an introduction to understanding your work. How can people follow your work and support?
Well, basically, I always say on my Facebook page's name is Cape Tortoise Group. I always have my phone number on there. So if somebody has any urgent queries, it happens about 2 or 3 times a week where people say a tortoise has been hit by a car, then yes, it'll be urgent. So then they can call me directly. But I would say Facebook is probably the easiest way. Yeah, I always say I'm not one of those guys that is greedy. If somebody wants to chat about tortoises, I may not reply immediately, but I always try and help. I mean, I've always got some form of charity, and I always think, even if it's not directly helping animals, indirectly it does. When you chat with people, give them husbandry advice and all that. I mean, with my reptiles, with my with my mice and rats, I'd say probably 90% of the mice that I breed every month, I actually want to start now next month doing a raffle. Then all NPOs and stuff that have raptors or snakes or small wildcats like servals and genets and stuff like that, then they can comment on that or tag somebody in. So basically, most of the mice that I breed is purely just for charity. And the thing that I think a lot of people struggle to fathom is how difficult it is to run an NPO in South Africa. If you're not getting international funds from it, you're obviously not getting government subsidies from it. And yeah, if we, I always try and make the comparison. I mean, what's the minimum wage currently in the US? $8?
Well, there's a federal minimum wage, and then many states have one that's significantly higher. I think federal is $7.75 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And what's a price of okay, like 2-slice sandwich that's now cut in half and in the supermarket?
I don't know.
If you want to buy like a hamburger, like a quarter pounder at McDonald's is like $7 or $8 today, at least in the Midwest, probably more in California.
Okay, so I always use the sandwich thing as a comparison, but yeah, I mean, if you look at a quarter pounder, there's no chance in hell in South Africa with an hour minimum wage you're going to be able to buy a quarter pounder. And just to put it into perspective, they do that Big Mac scale where they check everywhere in the world what's the price of a Big Mac.
Oh,
I think South Africa currently is, or it was for a very long time. I'm not really into junk food and stuff like that, but for a very long time, it was the cheapest country in the world for a Big Mac. But if you look at different comparisons, I mean, my sister lives in England. If you look at what's the minimum wage there and what you can buy with an hour minimum wage, as opposed to South Africa, I think our minimum wage in your terms is $1.40.
Wow.
So yeah, there's and that gets back into the thing of, now you need to tell somebody they can't do poaching. But even if they have a job, somebody in their family has a job and there's 4 people in the house, that's what they need to try and, survive on. Wow. So there's a lot of weird and different conversations that you can have, but I think that's a lot of things where first world countries, in my opinion, they sit on their side of the ocean and they have an opinion on third world countries and how dysfunctional it is. But there's a lot of people, myself included, that want to make a difference. But if you don't have the funds to do it, these days, I always say in South Africa, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So that's why I like having these kind of talks, having these kind of conversations. You always meet new people. People say, yeah, I've seen you on a video, let's chat. I may not be able to help financially, but if you, for instance, have a release site in mind, or if you want to do a study on my land, or just come to our farm and flip a few rocks, for me, it's awesome.
That's awesome.
So even just to check, I mean, there's some of the farms that have been heavily hit by drought, and just to go check if there's still dwelling tortoise populations left. But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Dirk, we'll let you go. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and your willingness to help turtles and people that love turtles. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Well, thank you for the suggestion. Thank you for co-hosting. Thank you for the giveaway. That was super fun. And everyone, will see you next week, where we will have Phil Simpson back to complete the conversation we started with him and his turtles he keeps in the Eastern Virginia area. So, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Tom.